We've never been to the moon. I mean, humanity at large definitely has, but we, as in localized to the people right here, have never been to the moon. Whatever weird and dangerous things are going on up there involving robots and homicide has nothing to do with us. This is a podcast. It's vaguely scientific. So, now that I'm legally exonerated from any connection to the secret laboratory on the moon, I can confidently say that I am Derek. And joining me as always, because he's been here on Earth the whole time, I swear, it's Jim, the scientist. Hi, Jim.
I've only ever been where there's atmosphere.
That's true. That's a good place to be.
Mm-hmm.
And our guest today is making his vaguely scientific debut. Please welcome our new friend, Jeremiah.
Hey, I'm a bit confused as to that introduction. I've very much have been on this show in the past.
Wait,
well, I mean,
really?
Definitely in your personal past as well, but
I don't remember you being on.
Yeah.
So I was on the 100th episode.
The what?
The
100th.
The 100th episode.
Oh.
No, that was Adam Savadan was our guest on that episode.
Yeah.
Shoot, that's right. Okay, so you guys are still calling it that. Great.
Well, anyway, this is the show where we answer the most ridiculous audience-submitted questions in a manner that we like to call vaguely scientific. But before we do that, it's time for the fun science fact of the day. Jim?
Mm-hmm. The Bering Land Bridge is an area that connected the eastern tip of Russia to Alaska, and it formed during the last ice age as the seawater froze and the sea levels consequently dropped, and it allowed for the passage of humans from Asia to the Americas.
Is that like the Lemuria thing?
Yeah, it's like Lemuria in that it is a lost landmass, but it is different than Lemuria in that it actually existed.
Oh. Well, why don't we have weird mythology about that one?
I don't know.
Well, I mean, other than bears that were even larger than polar bears, like the difference between an SUV-sized bear and like a Hummer-sized bear.
Yeah.
Oh. I want a Hummer-sized bear.
Well, hundreds of years of selective breeding will get you there.
Awesome.
100th of years.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. You're right.
Well,
weirdly enough, when it's plural, it's still pronounced hundreds.
Weird. Etymology.
Yeah. Well, with the fun science fact of the day out of the way, we should probably move on to our first question this week.
Mm-hmm.
Question 1 this week comes to us from Aaron. It is a common childhood fear that swallowing a watermelon seed will result in a watermelon growing in your stomach. How could you grow a watermelon in your stomach? Tackling the important questions.
Yeah. It's not is this true? It is, how could you make the watermelon grow in your stomach?
I mean, so right off the bat, we can all say this is untrue.
Well, yes. Yes, but I was doing some research into other places in your body where things can grow.
Ooh.
Same.
Yeah. Apparently, I wrote this down because his name is Russian, and I don't know how to say it. Artyom Sidorkin, I think is what this says. So allegedly, he had like a 2-inch fir tree start to grow in his lungs. And that was very uncomfortable, and he went to the doctor and they were like, you might have lung cancer, and they did x-rays and they opened him up and it turns out there was a fir tree inside of him. And there was a very similar case. I also wrote this guy's name down. Ron Svedin, I think is his name. I also I wrote this down with my handwriting, and so I can't read it super great. But he swallowed a pea the wrong way going down into the lungs, and it germinated. So apparently lungs would be fine. They are a damp, moist environment. Stomachs, on the other hand, are very acidic. So
that's interesting. So I read about the Russia thing that happened in 2009, and there were a lot of people claiming that it was a hoax. And so I spent a while trying to actually verify whether or not it was a hoax. And I didn't really find anything conclusive, but what it really seems like is that the claim was that a full tree had grown from seed to, and that was just misinformation. So yeah.
The thing that's interesting that Jim actually brought up is it really does seem like that the lung is the best place for it, because of course a plant typically needs it typically only really needs warmth, moisture, and oxygen to live. And if anything, it's in a temperature controlled environment. It's in your body. The thing that I think is kind of interesting is that a plant needs a pH level between like a 4.5 and an 8 in order to like healthily sprout, and it also needs sunlight. Of course, your stomach is like too acidic, like Jim said. But my thought that I had while I was reading some of these is they used to do these experiments in Victorian times where, and with some cows they still do it, but they'll install almost like a flap in your stomach. Almost in the same way that they do with like colostomy bags and things of that nature. And the thing that stops these plants that do get found in the body from like flowering or germinating anything to where it would be yielding fruit, because that's the whole kind of point of this myth, right? Like it's supposed to be able to like start then growing fruit. The big problem seems like it's sunlight. However, I'm wondering if you had like a port or something like that that maybe would allow sunlight or fresh air every once in a while into your stomach and lung, if that could cause it to then start fruiting.
Interesting. What part of sunlight does it need? Because if it's like UV, you could maybe install some kind of battery powered UV light.
It's actually mostly the visible light.
Oh, okay.
This feels like a really futuristic version of the I know an old lady who swallowed a fly to where we're going to then start. I know an old lady who swallowed a terrarium. I don't know wharium. She swallowed the terrarium.
Wait, I don't know why she swallowed the terrarium. Perhaps we'll bury him.
Okay, that's not bad.
Yeah. I mean, you could throw one of those like hydroponic lights in the lungs and or the stomach or whatever.
I was thinking grow lights are a thing. So,
and also with the lung, I mean, one of the reasons isn't even necessarily if you have like a really tough seed that can survive stomach acid, because of course those do exist. I mean, we've all seen the seeds when they come out, but that's the problem is that they move past. The lung would be the superior choice, because the lung, it's a pouch. There's nowhere for it to pass through or to go anywhere. Right.
Yeah, I guess that's a good point. I hadn't thought about that. Like, things are only in the stomach for a few hours, and then they're on their way through the intestines, so they can't really stay and, like, take root.
Right. Yeah. Literally.
Yeah. Yes.
So there's the idea that if a plant could grow inside of your body, once it got to the point where it's like absorbing nutrients and stuff, I was reading somewhere that they speculated it could turn into some kind of like parasitic organism that like feeds off of the energy that you take in from eating, which of course is several steps into impossible.
Well, that's interesting because of a lot of modern zombie related media seems to kind of use the idea of like spores and plants like that. The idea of like the parasitic organism
or fungi.
Fungi could do that.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I mean, there are a lot of different kind of fungi that can invade the body and cause problems and basically take root, for lack of a better phrase here.
Is it fungi or fungi? I don't know if I ruined that word in history as well.
I think that it's interchangeable.
Okay.
So like plural is fungi, right? Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
It's either fungi or fungi, and I don't think it really matters.
Okay.
No, I think fungi is funnier, so we'll go with that.
Because you can make the good joke with it.
It's a fungi.
I'm a fungi.
Wow.
I'm a fun guy.
So the latter part of the question, how could you grow a watermelon in your stomach? So the watermelon's vine, like specifically watermelons, they can't grow in a very small space.
Right.
However, I just kind of thought, how could you, if the end goal is just making the watermelon grow and we don't have to worry about anything other than that, I say we plant a watermelon plant in a corpse's stomach and leave it on the ground and let it grow from there.
See, I considered that, but now your wording's making me think of something else. I would like to go one further and say the point of this is that the watermelon has to grow in your stomach, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Watermelons grow on vines. It doesn't say that it has to be rooted in your body. Can I just lay down for a week or so beside this watermelon with my mouth open and just kind of shove the living vine into my stomach? If it dangles above said acid and the environment is good enough, I mean, it's planted in the garden, but the watermelon is indeed growing inside of me.
Or you could just jam it in there with like a catheter or something.
Wow.
I hate that sentence.
Yeah. Oof. It's a rough and tumble sentence there. The other thing I was going to say is that you could also probably take like a lot of antacids to neutralize some of that acid.
Oh,
and
interesting.
Basically you would have to, try to make the environment as favorable as possible.
Wake up in the morning, take a multivitamin, take an antacid, take a Miracle Grow, just start your day.
It might be a challenge, though, if you have the vine going down your throat. So I posit that you make a little window and you just run the vine through the window straight into the stomach.
Fair.
And then you can still eat.
Access door. Yeah. So how habitable could you make your stomach with enough antacids?
Not habitable enough to wouldn't kill you.
Okay.
But it's fun to think. It's fun to consider.
Mm-hmm.
When you were mentioning about the corpses, it reminded me of I forget what they're called, but they are like these little. So the premise is that you are dead, and I think they cremate you and put you into this little bundle with like a plant seed or like a tree seed, and then you plant the bundle and a tree grows out of you.
I've always wanted to do that. That's
you'll get your shot.
Super. Yeah. I mean, it's going to happen.
Have we talked about green burials on this show before? I feel like we have.
Possibly. I think we did once with Addison.
I think that's just a good idea.
Yeah. I'm not using it.
I'm done with it. It can fertilize the earth.
Hey, why not put a watermelon in there? Let's solve this.
I specifically want to be buried under a watermelon patch to fertilize watermelon.
Mm-hmm.
It's going in my will.
Yes.
I mean, I don't think anyone can stop you.
I mean, somebody has to do it, though, because I'll be dead.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, but they can't stop you. They just can not start you.
Yeah.
Fair.
It's interesting. This is off topic completely. It's interesting that the myth comes from watermelon seeds, because watermelon seeds are actually really good for you.
Yeah.
But they're not easy to digest if you eat them raw, but it's not going to hurt you to eat them.
Yeah. And it's funny because there are so many other seeds that we do actually eat. Like I eat pounds of sunflower seeds all the time, and I'm never in danger of sunflower growing in my stomach. Oh, that would be kind of rad.
Well, those are roasted though when you eat those.
True.
Yeah, we just make fun of them and then we eat them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pumpkin seeds and sunflower seeds,
like peas the reason why and corn.
The reason why it's watermelon really just goes back to not to get all. I mean, this, if I can break kayfabe for a moment and point out that we are recording this on November 1st, which is Reclamation Day for Martin Luther. There's a very kind of puritanical reasoning behind not wanting people to know that oh, I'm pregnant. Like that's the old wives' tale, like where that originated from is like what happened? I swallowed a watermelon seed and that's why my belly is this big.
Wow. I didn't know. I was specifically trying to find that out. That's interesting.
No, I'm a huge like nerd for specific like there's got to be a term for entomology that is based on a lie that somebody told once.
I feel like there is, but yeah, like urban legend kind of old wives' tales, I think is the
exactly the old wives' tale of like, well, why is her belly big like that? Well, she swallowed a watermelon seed and then that happened, so that's why. And then that kid, not knowing anything from that, just told some other kid like some secondhand lie, and then it just kind of like blossomed into, oh no, this watermelon will grow in my stomach. Well, it's because they didn't want you to know what like how you got here.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And then the stork came.
Yeah.
Caw-caw.
Laid an egg in your mother's stomach, and the pH balance for an egg to survive is.
So the last thing that I wanted to mention on this topic is that while it's difficult, if nigh impossible, to grow plants inside of a person, plants can grow on animals.
Right.
And I was looking at different lichens and algae that grows on sloth fur.
Mm-hmm.
So like you could probably build some kind of like structure that somebody has to like wear all the time, and they have a garden on their back.
Oh man, a fashionable garden on my back would just be like the must-have for the season.
Jeremiah, you're a chia pet.
Perfect.
I was thinking of Torterra, the Pokemon.
Oh yeah, the world turtle.
If I were to have a chia pet like structure on my body that was growing the titular chia, is there a kind of chia that also changes colors with the seasons? Because if I had like chia growing on me that was like luscious green in the spring but like a real cool orange in the fall, I could be down with that.
That would be interesting.
Aren't there some bonsai trees that do change color and just look really, really cool throughout the year?
Sure.
I wouldn't be surprised.
No, I just went to the conservatory and saw that there are a couple of different ones that are. I mean, they're mostly just bonsai. Strangely enough, like bonsai is not a species itself. It's just a way of cultivating. It's like calling something a casserole. Yeah.
I see.
So you can have bonsai maples or bonsai like coniferous and stuff like that. So you can absolutely have like a color changing one. I think I saw a pear that changed into like a really nice yellow.
That's pretty cool.
I tried to bonsai a chestnut tree once, and I just am very impatient. Hey, Jim, did you know that Walt Disney's head is frozen in a holding tank under Disneyland?
No, Derek, it's not. It's just not.
I'm pretty sure it is, Jim.
Just introduce the segment.
This is the conspiracy theory of the week.
The tabloid rumor that Walt Disney is cryogenically frozen, awaiting revival in a freezer under Pirates of the Caribbean.
In early 1967, a few weeks after Disney's death on December 15th, 1966, a reporter snuck into the hospital and found the allegedly post-mortem Disney suspended in a cryogenic metal cylinder.
In early 1967, a reporter from a particularly sketchy and rather racially biased tabloid newspaper claimed to have found the allegedly post-mortem Disney suspended in a cryogenic metal cylinder.
Some other news outlets continued the investigation for years to come, finding that Walt was meant to be thawed out in 1975, and that he was actually entombed in a freezer underneath the Pirates of the Caribbean ride at Disneyland.
Some other equally disreputable news outlets continued to spread rumors and make stuff up for years to come.
Even Disney employees discussed this. It was the biggest open secret throughout the enterprise. People continued to talk about it all the way through the 90s.
Which is odd, considering he was demonstrably not thawed out in 1975 by that point.
Walt Disney was a huge science fiction fan, and his creation of Epcot was originally designed to demonstrate how Americans would live in the future. Of course he'd want to stick around to see what happens. Once he read Robert C. W. Ediger's 1964 book, The Prospect of Immortality, he decided he needed to make cryogenics a reality.
Well, sure, I guess if he wanted to be immortal, that means he must have done it.
When news broke about this, people were shocked and needed to get to the bottom of it. Disney's Big Freeze, is Walt Disney frozen? Disney's on ice were topics of heated and fervent discussion all across the country. The leak was so widespread that in 1981, Walt Disney Studios invented a show called Disney on Ice to trick people into thinking that's what it was all along.
Yeah, I see no problem with that. Except for the part about it all being complete nonsense. Walt Disney was cremated 2 days after his death, and an urn containing his ashes was interred at the family mausoleum in the Forest Lawn Cemetery of Glendale, California. It was a small private service attended by his wife Lillian and his daughters. He was a chronic smoker, longtime sufferer of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, emphysema, and severe damage to his cervical spine from falling off a horse in the 30s. There is no solid proof that Disney survived lung cancer, and the technology of cryogenics even today wouldn't have been able to help him.
Then why did they invent the show Disney on Ice?
Disney on Ice was originally called Walt Disney's World on Ice, and it's a hugely profitable event to this day. That's why they made it.
Okay, so explain why, when rumors started to resurface again in 2013, they released a movie called Disney's Frozen, if not to flood Google searches with results in reference to that movie instead of the truth.
Well, that's pretty easy. Rumors didn't really start surfacing again in 2013, and Frozen is just a very loose adaptation of Hans Christian Andersen's The Snow Queen. That wasn't really a new direction for them.
Oh, I guess that's true.
Also, all the people who would have had to work at the Pirates of the Caribbean ride would have had to have known about this, and Disneyland hires a lot of college interns to do that. There's no way they wouldn't have messed it up in the past 50 years.
Oh, I guess that's true.
So what's the next question, Derek?
Question 2 this week comes to us from Kay. What kind of chemicals would need to be in the vat to turn the Joker's skin white, hair green? Would those chemicals possibly cause brain damage that would drive a person insane?
So, I had a really hard time finding something that would do both, but I want to relate a personal story to y'all.
Okay.
One time at work, I was handling some 30% hydrogen peroxide, and 30% hydrogen peroxide is about 10 times as strong as the kind you'd buy, at the drugstore or whatever. And
it's about too much.
It's about too much, exactly.
It's far too much.
And I didn't realize that it had got some of it had spilled sort of around the neck of the bottle. So I was holding it by the bottle's neck, and then when I set it down, it had bleached my skin and made my skin very itchy. And it was like that for like a week. But eventually I healed up. It was a rad chemical burn, the kind you normally get. But that wouldn't do that to your hair. It would just bleach your hair too, is what it would do. Also, It might kill you if you fell in it. I would think it would probably kill you.
That's okay. I have somewhere to go with that. I think this question's interesting because I always thought that the Joker was bitten by a radioactive clown.
I did too now.
No,
that's my new headcanon.
That's my origin story.
Jeremiah was bitten by a radioactive clown.
And I continue to bite to this day to spread.
Nice.
Spreading the radioactive clown virus.
His biting commentary on radioactivity in circus performers.
Well, okay, so I had a couple of different thoughts for this. And with each of these questions, I took it at face value, and then I also brought an answer that I think is completely outside the realm of what's being asked, but might be the most plausible technicality.
Awesome.
Okay. So, of course, I'm blonde, typically. I'm not right now. I ironically have green hair right now, but it has nothing to do with any sort of vat situation. I paid a very nice lady for this. 'Tis the season, had to get it green. So, But growing up very blonde in the summers, I'm sure that you have all experienced, if you're in a pool for long enough and that pool has been extra chlorinated, you do tend to get a bit of a green twinge to it. And so that was my initial thought was, well, perhaps this is just some sort of like super sized comic book chlorine that is bleaching the skin and greening the hair. And that can also possibly cause the irritation because the Joker also typically is shown as having kind of like somewhat irritated eyes or like yellowed eyes or things of that nature. So that could make sense. However, I mean, maybe there's some sort of oxidized coppering that's happening, but I want to pitch my favorite headcanon for this.
Sure.
And that is the concept of vitiligo, which of course
what?
is...
I looked that up.
Okay, so here's my theory for this. Vitiligo, for those of you who might not know, of course, is an autoimmune disease. What happens is typically the body's immune system will attack and destroy body tissue, especially the parts of your skin that produce melanin, which of course gives your skin the pigment, leaving the rest of your skin essentially unharmed. So my thought was perhaps there's something going on either with this supersonic cosmic comic book chlorine that maybe it's not necessarily that is the thing that is bleaching your skin. Is there the possibility that this is some sort of chemical that becomes so your skin and your melanin cells become so saturated with it that it caused almost like an instant autoimmune response that would cause you to become very, very pale very, very quickly without it necessarily creating like a total albinism situation.
I thought I was so clever thinking of that. That's awesome.
I'm from the future and also the past, and I've already heard this episode, and I'm reading a script.
Okay. Like that episode of Doctor Who.
Don't blink.
Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, that the idea of the vitiligo actually led me down an interesting rabbit hole of looking at products that we've used for skin whitening in the past.
Oh.
Okay.
Because I guess that people who suffer from vitiligo, they might have the option to buy various skin whitening products to sort of level out the difference in color to make it not as stark.
Interesting.
A couple of the things that I was looking at here, there's like a lot of different kinds of acids. There's something called kojic acid here on this list. I don't actually know what kojic acid does. Let's see. Oh, it's made by fungi. Fermentation process of malting rice. Ooh, sake. Okay, now I'm on board. Generally, they're not like ridiculously strong like chemicals. They are things that are going to work over the course of a long period of time. But it's in that similar vein. You know, if you were trying to sort of balance out those the color differences. But you'd have to just like lay in that vat for a while, I think.
So if you fell into a vat that was like 50% chlorine and 50% sake, you're coming out as a clown.
That's
maybe he's not crazy. Maybe he's just high on fumes and drunk.
Very drunk and very high.
He's very drunk and very high. Yes, that's actually probably not wrong.
That would actually explain a lot of things. Just getting up and be like, "It's me. I'm real funny. We'll blow up a hospital.
Mess up Batman." I hate that guy.
Funny ears.
I
hanging out with
hate that guy, but I love him.
That man, I tell you what, he's the guy that makes me lose all the time, and I'm gonna get him. I'm gonna get him this time with my happy fish.
Do you think this is my color? This is my Fenty fire truck red. Is this my color? I want to just be draped in purple right now. Just purple everywhere.
Where'd I park my clown car?
On this episode of Vaguely Scientific, we all do really obnoxious drunk voices for 20 minutes. So if I could take a turn here, so I have a couple points I guess I want to make about this, because the falling into chemicals origin story of the Joker is not always the origin story of the Joker, but it is the most commonly known.
Right.
And in most cases I could find it's described as chemical waste from the Ace Chemical Company. And a lot of times they'll say that the Joker's skin and hair are bleached, but the rest of the clown getup, like the red lips and stuff, is makeup that he applies later. That's
typically what I've heard too, which makes it interesting for a point that I'm going to bring up later, but continue.
So there's two ways I want to, or 2 points, I guess, I want to make with that in mind. And that is that, one, in the Death of the Family story arc, there is a few panels where Batman is investigating the idea, I guess, is the Joker is trying to recreate more Jokers and infect all the Bat family. And so the Batman recites that he knows the chemical makeup of that vat of chemicals by heart. And Jim, you know more about chemistry than I do, so I'm just going to read off these chemicals and see if you know anything about them.
Okay.
The chemical makeup of this vat is 11% sodium hydroxide.
Okay.
34% sulfuric acid. 5% chromium solution. Zinc sulfide, and it is doped with copper, which gives it a green glow. And Batman goes on to say there must have been something else, some mystery ingredient, because that mixture would just kill someone.
Sure would. You had me at sulfuric acid. I was like, that man should be dead.
Yeah, 34% sulfuric acid.
And, I like the little bit of like, almost as if you're reading a recipe and you say, and then maybe a little sprig of pumpkin spices, like, and copper for color.
Just some copper for that green glow.
Sodium hydroxide is not a fun toy either. Like, they're all pretty bad.
So that's canonically out of the Death of the Family storyline, what the vat of chemicals was, which, so there's another storyline that takes us, I'm avoiding spoilers because these are good comics that people should read. But in the Three Jokers storyline, there is a storyline where the Joker and friends are trying to create a fourth Joker, and so they steal a vat of these chemicals and they're trying to find a suitable candidate of somebody that they can dip into it and turn them into an extra Joker. I have mixed feelings about the Three Jokers storyline, and this is one of the negative ones. I don't like the idea that you can just carbon copy another Joker by putting them in this chemical, because there's a lot of like psychological trauma that is just ignored.
Right. Well, that's the same argument we had when we were talking about cloning Hitler. It's like, you can't, you can make a person that is physically Hitler and genetically Hitler, but they had this, life experience that led them down the path they ended up on. So you're not just going to get Hitler too. You're just going to get a guy that's genetically Hitler.
Yeah. So I guess
that's a great sentence. Oh boy.
Oh man.
Very nature versus nurture.
Yeah.
For even evil clowns. Right.
So the last point I really want to make, and this is why I brought up the fact that depending on the storyline, the chemicals might not even be part of it, is because if the Joker is dropped into a vat of chemicals, it could very likely be that the changes are just cosmetic, and that because we talked about, could it cause some kind of brain damage that makes them lose their mind? It could be that this person is already unhinged, and this is just a trigger for that. And that is actually the case in Tim Burton's Batman.
Right.
And then jumping off of that, in The Dark Knight, the Heath Ledger Joker, they don't even go into his backstory.
Right.
And he is depicted as wearing white face paint.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually.
Something that I think that's really interesting also is the idea of the Joker isn't necessarily completely physically transformed or whatever, just on the outside. I like the idea that the character, it's always, there's a distinct voice that comes with that performance. And I always kind of had the headcanon that perhaps whenever he dropped into the chemicals, whatever they were, he may have like either inhaled or it may have like also scalded or burned something like within his throat or his vocal cords that could have possibly caused. Who knows? Maybe he swallowed inhaled a seed on his way down.
Yes.
The seed of crime.
And his hair is the plant that grew.
Oh, that's why it's green. He's actually bald.
Whoa, he's a plant man.
Solved it.
So it's interesting that we talked about him just being drunk, because one of the things that could have happened is if he already had this desire to do these things, it could have just like taken away his impulse control.
Not just pure id. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, something that I want to bring up also just chemically is, because you pointed this out, and I think that it's an important thing to point out because it's something I always kind of liked in the comics. The idea that his skin is white and his hair is green, but the other stuff like the lipstick and things like that, which I believe was a later addition to suggest it's like, no, that's stuff that he's just applying himself. Since being dropped into it, and not other than Batman potentially, nobody really knowing what that chemical makeup is, the Joker also knows it and has taken his time to perfect it to where he has it weaponized in a way that it does kill the person, but it gives them a more accurate, like makeup accurate kind of look. Of course, there's storylines where he has attacked people and sprayed them with such a thing that it makes their lips ruby red and their skin white and their hair green, and then they also die with a smile on their face. He was also able to do that to fish and different animals at separate times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's some way to take that, which depending on how dark you want to make the character, like it could be that he gasses them with like a nerve toxin and then actually sits there and applies makeup to them.
Which I could totally see happening.
True.
Yeah. That's when you want to be more serial killer Joker.
He just mustard gases a room and he goes in and he's like, oh, this is going to be so sick. Batman's going to love it. And he's just putting lipstick on all these bodies.
Batman's going to love it. He's going to hang it on his fridge.
I'm going to put that one right here, right next to the other crimes you've done.
Yeah.
You know what I want to say? We talk about Batman quite a bit on this show because we have a lot of Batman fans on the show, but we rarely talk about Batman's Rogues Gallery, and we should do that more.
Yeah, because his Rogues Gallery is like really well fleshed out. And of course, there's Calendar Man. Calendar Man
is, yeah.
I bet Calendar Man would have known that today was Reformation Day.
That's true.
He would have had some little rhyme about it, too.
Yeah.
Martin Luther, November 1st.
Catholic Church is the worst.
Catholic Church. That's exactly what it would have been. Nailed his opinions on the door, said, this is what it should be for. It just becomes like very Dr. Seuss very quick. Dr. Seuss sounds like a Batman villain.
He does. And he rhymes everything, so of course he is a villain.
Have any of you ever seen the movie Willard?
No.
Yes, like 100 years ago, but yes.
There's an old version and then there was a remake with Crispin Glover.
Huh.
And it's about a guy who like ultimately learns how to control rats. And he becomes like he kills people with the rats. And I watched this movie and I was like, I'm waiting for Batman to show up.
Well, I mean, there's Ratcatcher. That's literally his whole thing.
That's true.
So that is 100%, 110% a Batman villain. And then they also had Ratcatcher 2. His daughter was in the Suicide Squad. So you're absolutely correct. That's just what it is.
Well, there you go. Well, listeners, I feel like we already beat you to the punch. We've determined that the Joker is growing plants inside of his body. Jim, do we have any listener mail?
We do, and as always, if you want to send us listener mail, you can email us at feedback@vaguelyscientific.com. You can comment on our blog, you can like us on Facebook, you can tweet @VaguelySci, and this email comes to us from Patty and is in regards to episode 107, Every Monster All at Once. And Patty says, if you like to combine monsters, you may enjoy reading about fearsome critters. Supposedly, they're weird animals that lumberjacks would create to entertain each other on the job. Many of them are combination animals like the jackalope.
I do want to just point out, that's episode 108, Jim.
Oh, how about that? It's not my problem.
That's fair. Jim did mention the chimeras, like all of the monsters would be chimeraed together.
Yeah.
That's a fun idea.
I think that the jackalope is a really interesting one to bring up because that's something that is so popular that now you just see it in cartoons and video games and stuff.
Yeah.
Well, isn't there also, like, just, I'm sure I'm going to completely ruin the possibility of a future episode just talking about the jackalope, but there's some sort of fungus. This is kind of related to a thing beforehand, a sort of fungus or sort of specific, bone sickness that will cause growths like that up on rabbits.
Oh, interesting.
So there is actually a little bit of a scientific basis to where you can look and be like, oh, well, I guess that's technically a jackalope.
Huh. I didn't know that either. That's kind of cool.
I don't sleep at night, and I Wikipedia a lot.
Yes. I bet it would be fun to set out in the woods and, like, not tell scary stories, but tell stories that are kind of entertaining like that. Like,
oh, just lies?
Yeah.
Just lies. It is fun to tell lies, Jim.
Well, yeah.
You don't have to go to the woods at all. I'll do it right now.
Like coming up with fake animals, just like out there in the woods, you're just having your lumberjack times and there's a campfire and it's like, did I ever tell you the story about the bear that has octopus tentacles and camel's hump?
No, I guess you haven't.
Well, let me tell you about this one. It climbs trees at 3 times as fast. And
there used to be a game that we would play that was called the Superist. And the joke would be that you would come up with a superhero and be like, my guy is Plunger Man. And he can plunge anything and he can unstick anything. And then you'd say, oh, yeah, well, my guy is Captain Goop. And he makes things so goopy that it can't be stuck. And the next person would say, well, I'm I have Captain Sawdust who can absorb any sort of liquid. And that would be the bit. It'd be fun to do that, but with animals.
Yeah.
So you would have like, well, I have a jackalope. It's a rabbit with antlers. Like, oh, yeah. Well, I have an eagle that can actually dig through the ground like a gopher so it can hunt you from underneath. So its antlers can't keep it safe.
Oh.
The contest of Dr. Moreau or something.
The contest of Dr. Moreau.
Well, I've got a carnivorous mole that has pangolin scales so that the claws of the digging eagle can't get it, and then it can eat the eagle.
Well, I have a rabbit, and it's cute.
Yeah.
Oh, it's too cute to kill. I guess it lives. We can't beat it.
Yeah.
Can't beat that.
No. Well, thank you very much for that email. And if you have a question that needs to be answered in a vaguely scientific manner, please email us at questions@vaguelyscientific.com. If you want to get our episodes the minute that they're released, you can subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and all the other cool places that podcasts like to hang out. And subscribing and leaving feedback really helps us out, and so does telling your friends.
Yeah, tell all your friends so they can hear us and have fun with us too.
Mm-hmm. Our vaguely musical intro is composed by Anthony Pizzelli, and don't forget to check out our merch store over at vaguelyscientific.threadless.com. Not only does it help to support the show, but it also helps to support you and your friends with cool stuff that is cool.
Yeah. So thank you to Jeremaiah for being on the show with us.
Hey, thank you. I'm glad to be back.
Yeah, back for the first time.
Back to the future.
Anyway, for Vaguely Scientific, I am Derek.
I'm Jim.
I was Jeremiah.
Yay. We should probably start cleaning up the secret laboratory on the moon.
Toodaloo, Earth. Again. My favorite part of that is the part where it's like, we've never been to the moon. Actually, humanity has been to the moon. Yeah. Very important distinction.
I really liked the difference where it was like, so we're definitely not a part of the homicides and the robots that are happening on the moon. If anything, that reads like an alibi, which I appreciated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.